today I'm just going to give you a basic introduction to chat notebooks and what they are and why they are. So to start, go back a little bit in history. If you think about, the 1980s or so, the way that you interacted with a computer system like Mathematica or like, any operating system shell or whatever, is you give it a command, it gives you an answer. It's a back and forth, prompt response sort of thing. And the way in which that was done is what we refer to as the glass teletype interface model, of course, after paper teletypes. And, a fundamental property of these things is that the record is immutable. It just scrolls along. It's either actually literally printed on paper or it's going off on the screen. And there's really no way to interact with the past because it's happened. But this is obviously unnecessarily limiting. And, sort of the origin story of notebooks was just the idea, well, why can't you edit the previous inputs? Why can't you just go back and select something in your history and, reevaluate it or edit it slightly and reevaluate it? And it turns out if you make one small addition, which we call cell brackets, basically delimiting what's input and what's output, then you don't have to select a whole range of input. You can just click anywhere within an input cell and it knows to reevaluate that whole command. And if you've labeled output separately from input, then it could automatically delete the output. So new output replaces old, which isn't possible in a plain text document. So that's where notebooks came from. So it's a little interesting to see that, chat interfaces, LLM, chatbot interfaces are basically glass teletype interfaces in their fundamental implementation. And I think that's because they're sort of modeled after human chat interfaces, namely, text messaging or, other such sort of social media things, where the glass teletype interface is kind of appropriate because the conversation did happen and it's not mutable. You can't go back and, as much as you might want to, change what you said and have that become the new reality. But again, in the case of interacting with a chatbot, you're interacting with a computer system. You can change the past. They are, in fact, completely stateless. They have no memory whatsoever other than what you supply them each time in a chat interaction. So it's actually a perfect use case for a notebook interface. And so that's what we decided to do. Is we're going to implement, the first approximation, simply an interface to a chatbot, except it's a notebook. So you can go back and edit the old inputs. You can rerun conversations. You can see what would happen if you change, prompting or other settings, or just edited your input or edit the output, because you can change what the chatbot said and believe you. So I'm going to actually demonstrate how to do this. So the first thing is, how do you create a what we call chat-enabled note? The way I always do it is just say new note like that. Now, if you do that for various implementation reasons, this is an ordinary notebook and it doesn't have chat features enabled in it. But if you're using a sufficiently recent version, later 13 point something, any sort of current version, you'll have this new icon in the toolbar. And if you click that, you can, you get this little enable chat features, and you click that, and now you have a whole new menu. And this is now a chat enabled notebook. You can also do it directly here, and we'll get to that one later. You can do it this way. So when you have a chat enabled notebook, I just typed single quote. And so now we have a new type of input cell, which is distinguished by this blue border. And there's this icon on the side, which is actually a drop-down menu with a bunch of choices that we'll get to. And this, I'll just say hello. If I type shift return, just like a regular input cell, instead of sending it to Mathematica, it sends it to, in this case, I've selected GPT-4 as my model. The menu here, let's go to GPT-4. And we'll get to personas in a minute, but I'm basically using the default code assistant persona, which likes to write Mathematica code. So let me just do a couple of examples, and then we can see, let's say, so I'm again going to, if I just start typing, let's see, say sine of x here, right? So this is regular Mathematica input. Now I type a single quote. This is actually a variation I have not tried before. So this demonstrates the fact that chat history in the chat notebook world is everything that comes above the input cell, chat input cell that you're evaluating. And it knew that I was talking about the sine function because it looked. And there we go. And it was very sensible and, figured out how to make a plot, and that I wanted, that minus 2 pi to 2 pi might be a reasonable plot range. Sometimes it picks 0 to 2 pi. I mean, let's make this tangent instead, right? And if I now reevaluate this input, it's going to do what I think you expect, which is that it's looking at the new history and it's doing it again with the new history. History in chat notebooks is different from history in a kernel. In a kernel, history is basically temporal. It's like if you go to a different window somewhere and do another calculation, and then you go back to your first window and ask for percent, what matters is not what's above it in that window. It matters what did you do most recently. But that's not the case with chat notebooks. They don't care about time in which something was done. They care about place where it is. So it's the structural position within the notebook. If it's physically above saying you're evaluating, then it will get sucked in. There's 2 different ways that it can do this when you ask for code. Here it's written the code for me, and then it's actually gone and evaluated. I actually find this often more useful, and sometimes I even tell it, don't use the tool. I don't want you to actually generate the plot for me. I just want the code. Because if you get code and output like this, you can then click one of these things. So this one is most useful. This copies it down below and evaluates it. So now it's just created a perfectly ordinary input cell, which is very useful because now if you want to change it a little bit, like you want to go to, 4 pi this way, it's giving you a starting point. So chat delimiters. So if you type a tilde character, so shift backtick here, that gets you this gray line. And the gray line is a blocker. So if I say that, it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, because it doesn't see. This line has blocked it from looking backwards. So if I do evaluation up here, it's going to know, because when I hit shift return here, it retransmits this entire history. So I have an example. Write me some code to sort numbers by their English names. And let's see what it does this time, because it's fascinating variable how it chooses to do this. And sometimes it comes up, this is amazing. I didn't know we had a function called integer name. It would have never occurred to me that we would have such a function or how to search for it, but we do. And if we do this, so 1, 3, 2, yeah, that's alphabetical by its English name. I had thought of all kinds of very complicated ways one could do this that would involve big tables of how to say a number. But the LLM taught me that we just have a function for that. So let me then show you next personas. So personas are basically prompts that are prepended as system prompts to the data that's sent to the LLM together with your chat history and your new question. So it's basically just a block of code. And some of them, that block of code is quite large, like Code Assistant and Code Writer. They are pretty large, complicated prompts that instruct it in detail how to properly format Mathematica code so that it will be recognized, and so you'll get these automatic things. These happen because the prompting has caused the output to be structured in a certain way, tells it how to use the tools, sets it up. Some of the prompts are quite simple, like Groot. The prompting is quite simple. The Groot persona simply answers, I am Groot, no matter what you ask it. So the difference between Code Assistant and Code Writer, Code Assistant, it's like it writes you code and it also talks about it. Code Writer is supposed to just write the code and not explain it. And then there's tools. So tools are a very powerful thing. They're similar to plugins. You may have heard about the Wolfram Alpha and Wolfram language plugins that OpenAI has deployed, which help the public web version of GPT to give bad answers for math. Tools are like a private version of that, and they can do things like, search the web or search files on your computer, search our documentation, call Wolfram Alpha. And the difference between these and a plugin is that these things, you enable one of them, they're actually going back to your computer. They're running Wolfram language code on your computer, as opposed to on, some public server somewhere, which is both scary and also much more powerful because you can ask it to do things with your files. You can write your own tools where you get to write the Mathematica code that will be called along with the prompting that will instruct the LLM when to use this tool. So the difference between a chat-enabled notebook is what we've been doing. It's like you're basically, if you start typing, you get a Mathematica input cell. If you type single quote, you get a chat input cell. Chat-driven notebook, it just by default, if you start typing, so I didn't type anything extra, I just typed a letter and it creates a chat input cell. And I think it's also the default persona is plain chat as opposed to code writer. And plain chat basically just means minimal additional prompting beyond what the raw, what you would get on the web if you just went to the web interface. So, you can have different personas. You can switch and get a different answer from a different persona.